We speak of Advent as a time of waiting and preparation for the coming of God, for the fulfillment of the promises of God at Christmas embodied in Jesus the Christ, hope and peace and joy and love. I think sometimes we speak a lot about the waiting and not quite as much about the preparation. There is a lot to wait on in every element of our Advent life. There's a lot that hope is yet waiting on. There's a lot that we can't do to make things more peaceful. It seems sometimes joy just arrives. There's not something we can do to make it happen. And love, there's a lot of love yet to be lived. But if we focus only on the waiting, especially in this season, when there seems so little we can do, when it seems like so much is out of our control, when so much of what we would usually do has been canceled, it's easy to get stuck in the waiting. It's easy for this to be a time where we just sit back and wait on God. And that's good and that's understandable. It's also not the whole story. Just as we spoke about hope last week, hope is not just glorified wishing. Hope, as we said, is a defiant antidote to despair. It is something substantive and fierce. Peace is the same way. It occurred to me this week that peace, real peace, is always louder than I think. Because usually when I think peace, it's the first part of peace and quiet. Maybe I'm just projecting out of where I'm living my life right now, but peace to me is usually about absence. Peace is space instead of crowding. Peace is quiet instead of noise. Even more broadly, peace is the absence of violence. When this all stops, then there will be peace. Peace is, or at least peace feels, like what will just happen by default when all this stuff that is wrong goes away. But that's not the whole story, and that's not the fullness of peace. Real peace is always louder than I think, because real peace means harmony and flourishing and joy and celebration. That's our Hebrew word for peace, shalom. It is when everything is flourishing together. It is the joy of a wedding feast. It is a kindergarten let out for recess. It is lively and loud and wonderful. That is the vision of peace. When Jesus is offering in the Gospel of Matthew his Beatitudes, his litany of blessings, the way of being that will be in the kingdom of God, he says famously, in chapter 5, verse 9, he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." I looked at that word this week, peacemakers, and I found it was the only time in the Bible that that word is used. For a little bit of fun word study, I will save you the full nerdiness of it, and I'll save me trying to pronounce the Greek. But that word, peace, comes from a word that means to tie or to bind together. The Greek word for peace translated there means to bind together all the essential pieces until they are whole. So this word peace that Jesus is invoking here is not about peace and quiet necessarily. And it's not only about the absence of noise and the absence of violence. It is actually about wholeness. And Jesus could have said, "Blessed are the peaceful, they who themselves are at peace." And he could have said, "Blessed are those who have found peace," or for whom peace has found them, even more passively. But he doesn't say this. He says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," which is to say, blessed are those who are binding together the broken pieces of this world until we are made whole. That is a very compelling vision for this time. When it is so much easier to hurt than to heal, it is so much easier to tear than to repair, and we see a lot of brokenness and fracturing. Blessed are those who are binding together the broken pieces, all the essential parts, until we are whole. For they shall be called children of God. Real peace takes work. Real peace requires peacemakers. And yes, some of this is about creating the conditions for wholeness and joy and peace. It is about eliminating the things that keep us from being whole and peaceful. Some of it also is about putting in the work to make it possible for yourself and others to be whole. This is a time, yes, for celebrating peace. And in this, experiencing peace. And to some extent, yes, still waiting on the fullness of peace. But it's also a time to be working on peace. We love our music. It's joyfully, immersively, immensely peaceful. But it doesn't just happen. The loveliness that we just experienced, that peace, is the product of lifetimes of work, of effort, of practice. The meals that we share, the bustling holiday full house meals that we're missing, they don't just happen. They take a lot of work. The same is true of every moment we share together on this planet. If we're waiting simply for peace as absence, we will be waiting a long time. Instead, we're called to learn to notice, to name, and to love the glimpses of holy peace that we are given, and to work together to make peace where it hasn't been found or realized yet.